Welcome. Hey guys, and welcome back to Rooted Woman. I wanted to talk today, and I think that not enough people talk about, honestly, as a mom, like what that feels like when feel like you're underwater. You're screaming underwater, but only the bubbles can be seen by society on the outside. I really wanted to talk today about the implications of survival mode, whether or not you know you're in it or not. Honestly, it took me the last decade to figure out that I always have been. That's something that I wanted to talk about today. In doing that, I really want to be able to give some backstory to a little bit of my life that you haven't really heard about. So, when I grew up, when I was little, I grew up in a split household. It was a very kind of funky situation because my mom was very dynamic and very strong, more like a bull. But she had a very tumultuous relationship with my father. He was very in and out, very impermanent. And before you or anybody else jumps to conclusions about, like, oh, here she goes with a conversation about daddy issues, that really isn't an issue for me. I think that the only issues that I've ever had in my life was basically I learned how to change my oil at 16 because nobody else was going to do it type of issues. And, if you talk about my dad being impermanent in my life, it's really led me to the point of I have a fantastic credit score. I know how to change IKEA furniture and build it on my own. In all jokes aside, I've come out a very independent person. Whether or not that's been detrimental to my growing up is kind of something that I'm beginning to look back at, is that what did it do to me to be hyper independent, and what did it do to me to be hyper fixated on making sure that I fix things. See where I'm going? All that aside, when I was growing up, my mom had passed when I was younger, so I had been put from this really funky dynamic. My dad was in and out. My mom was the sole provider, very much showed her love through emotional depth and support, to this very different lifestyle at about 12 years old, of this dynamic shift of my identity, even at 12, being moved into what I could provide. And my dad was very financially all over the place. He married very early after my mom died. And what ended up happening was that I was graced for good grades, which you should, as a parent, grace for good grades. I got into sports. There was a lot of love showed by what I could do in sports. And that, I think when you're a parent, you want to get your kids into sports if it's their identity. The only time that you're showing them any validation is when it's sports related or activity related. You can get into some funky spots. At least I know I did when I was that age. It was a very different time. So again, I shifted into these ways of thinking, oh, I'm going to be able to get emotional validation and love through what I'm going to be able to provide to this family. It didn't always work out so well when I wanted to rebel, or I didn't want to do anything, or I wanted to have an alone day or go hang out with my friends. Like, I had to be duty driven. And so that created some conflict. At 16, I decided I had basically enough, and I was on my own. I had gotten a worker's permit very, very early, and started weaving my way through high school and sports and working, trying to keep myself away from home as much as possible. So at that point, I had gotten my own apartment. I had basically started this life of independence without really knowing what I was doing. But it launched me into the workforce of never calling in sick, always covering shifts, not really knowing what the definition of burnout was, but I was headed straight for it. So it started really early. And I didn't really have that epiphany until rather recently, where this has been kind of born and bred into my personality and into my DNA. So, like I was saying, now what survival mode feels like, and that anxiety feels like you're trapped underwater and you're screaming. If anybody chooses to look, all they see is bubbles at the surface. So it's this internal battle of trying to make sure that everything around you is completely cohesive, while on the external, it's even more important that people see it that way. I've become totally adverse to having that rule my life anymore. With this anxiety, instead of pure panic, it very much sits on the surface. Survival mode for me looks like making sure that I'm scanning for dangers and planning for what if to the very T. Like, I worked out every scenario in my head. This was very much apparent, especially when I didn't have anybody to provide for. And because providing took me off of that, and I could put my attention and my identity in that person, and I could kind of deflect what was going on the inside. When I was in relationships, as friendship, romantic, high stakes, very, very high stakes relationships. I needed to make sure that I was accepted. I still do sometimes. Like, I love my home and I love how it's decorated and like the feel of it. Sometimes when I have people over, I'm like, I switch into this mode of like, I'm sorry it's so cluttered or messy. Not because I feel that way, but because I feel that I can read the person as to whether or not they keep their household like this, and somehow I have to kind of lay a blanket of comfort, like, this is my home. I want you to feel like home, but I'm going to make excuses for how I live to make you feel a little bit more higher on the echelon. I'm really sick of doing that. I really want to go in the opposite direction and be like, this is my life, accept it or not, and if you don't, there's the door. This has turned me into, over the years, very much like a people pleaser. I sacrifice my own boundaries to maintain safety and certainty. That's absolutely no way to live. It doesn't help me in the relationships with my kids. It doesn't help me with the relationship with myself. And any sort of relationships that come into my life need to be authentic and need to be, this is me. When I hit my 30s, it shifted a little bit because I had multiple kids at that point, and the energy shifted. There's always so many things going on in my house. Got to do this and got to have this done and I have this done and we got plans this weekend and soccer starting and baseball starting and da-da-da-da-da. And that's normal lifestyle stuff when you have multiple children in a life that you're maintaining. The problem with it is that I got to the point where relaxation was dangerous. That my house was neat, that I looked perfect on the outside, that I had, don't even talk to me about maintaining my credit score and doing all of that, like hyper fixation. I acted as if I was going to, especially when I was like cleaning house. I don't know if you guys do that, where you're like, you get stressed out or the anxiety starts. You need to clean your house to make sure that like some semblance of like control can happen. You can ask my daughter this. Like, I would get so worked up. I'd be like, I just need to straighten the couch cushions. That's not good. And that's where my head was at. I realized it now as I was slowly starting to come out of this identity that I thought was benefiting me. I knew that in the back of my head, I knew that keeping a household clean with 3-4 kids running around this house was about as realistic as, I hate to be crude, about as realistic as me being able to take a poop on my own without being interrupted by children.
Ew, Mom.
Denying the fact that they rate their poops on the scale of small to large.
Ew, Mom.
That's the reality I'm living in, but my actions were not aligning with the fact that like this is just real life. So I always ended up feeling, and still kind of do at some points, where I'll scan to see if like if someone have a problem with me, or has their tone changed, has their demeanor, like being able to read their body language. It's not as fixated now as it was back then, but it still hits like scan every once in a while, like, are you okay? And that can get annoying to people because what I'm doing is for my own validation. And while I am concerned about the other person's well-being, I'm more concerned about my safety. And that's not fair to anybody that I bring into a relationship. As I was doing all of this hyperfixating and all of this like obsessive behavior, I still took time to make sure that I was connecting with my children, not as much as I should have. I would still have moments of like making sure like, hey, I need to be able to check in with everybody, get through teeth brushing, being able to have a nighttime routine, be able to tuck the kids into bed. But it was like in little bits and pieces outside of making sure I was mastering the whole scope of our life. And it left me exhausted. And you know why? It's funny. The body interprets the emotional pressure of not providing enough as an emergency. My cortisol was spiking. I would get brain fog and muscle tension. I snapped at my kids a lot. The deep breaths didn't work. Everybody talks about, regulate your breathing. The deep breaths didn't work because I felt like the deeper the breath, the more oxygen I was providing to the anxiety for it to scream louder. So breath work is a little bit easier now, but it's like back then it was like that was the deep breath, and it definitely wasn't doing me any justice. So how did I know when I started coming out of it? This wasn't a sudden thing. It wasn't like snap and you're out of it. It was very quiet. And it required me to be present to be able to notice it. It was saying no to my kids or saying no to somebody else. That feeling of saying no hit differently than guilt. I told them no and it was fine. The day still went on. It did hit in a big bang around my divorce. If you really want to talk about fight or flight, that was my test of all tests. Mode has a purpose, an inherent one, and it really came out when the fact that I had to leave my situation. My kids had to leave with me in the situation. Nothing says survival mode than having to draft up eviction papers and get a house in my own name and move to finally get someone to go and go permanently. And so that was the catalyst that kind of started the snowball rolling, was me choosing myself and choosing to be a better mom to my kids. Saying no too, and even in the smallest ways as well. If I didn't want to go do something, or if I didn't want to participate in this for school, or if I didn't want to participate in this for work, like I said no without backing it up with a text or an email explaining how sorry I was about the fact that I couldn't go, couldn't do this, or couldn't do that. I just said no, I can't. I let that land, and I got used to hearing the silence in return and feeling comfortable in that. And it was muscle memory. It just kept going. I started learning what boundaries were, instead of making myself available to anybody and everybody to make sure that they were happy, so that my inner world felt more comfortable and safe. I really took in doing that. The social mask started to fall off. I'm not. No offense to any PTA mom, but that's not me. I am the mom at sporting events that screams the loudest. I forget the snacks on snack day. I'm in no way one of those, I don't think I've ever worn a collar in my life. So just started taking off the social mask. What I wanted to say, when I wanted to say it, not worrying about the outcome, while being sensitive, but very firm in the boundaries that I had created in no matter what environment I was in. And I started to protect my own energy from people that I didn't really felt, I guess, deserved it. So in turn, that built my self-worth. I'm the kind of person that if you're my friend, hang out at my house, watch movies, I'll go out every once in a while, but I'm a bit of a homebody. And I really honestly started to dream again, and I talked about a little bit about that dream in the last video. It really goes back to the freedom of what I wanted to be able to accomplish in my life, and I wanted to be able to pass down to my kids, and this idea of dream whatever you think is possible and really go after it, because there's no reason why you shouldn't have it. The big shift, and I'll go into this in another video too, is I started having conversations with my daughter and how she was grappling through issues with friends at school and in her life, and feeling I feel like I need to be the mediator between everybody. I'm like, please don't, the brakes on it. We've been, I guess, kind of going through this together, of figuring out, okay, I know that I've been in survival mode my whole life, and I'm starting to come to the surface now finally. And what does that look like navigating my kids, who I inadvertently passed down my blueprint to? And my daughter's taught me a ton, and like I said, I'm going to go into it in another video. She throws me the life raft every single time. As much as I tried to keep things together and tried to keep everything together and things functioning properly and feeling like they were okay and safe and secure, and passed it down, and now they mimic my behavior. So journey And what I'm going to be talking about for as long as you'll let me is making sure the kids know they can crumble that blueprint and start something completely fresh. Little out of the box rebels that say what they want to say and say no whenever they want to. So, thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time.